Tom squinted through the viewport of the small shuttle as the alien landscape loomed closer. Vast plains of silvery grass stretched out in every direction, dotted with rocky outcroppings and shimmering lakes that reflected the planet's three suns. Xylar was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Pristine, peaceful, and yet unsettlingly unfamiliar. He tried to swallow his unease as the shuttle rocked slightly during its descent. "First time on an alien planet?" the pilot called back, a grizzled human named Reed who had clearly done this dozens of times. "Yeah, first time," Tom replied, gripping the armrests of his seat. "I was expecting something more industrial." Reed chuckled. "You're thinking of the trade worlds, the hub planets. Xylar's a bit different. They like their nature here." The shuttle landed smoothly on a platform near a small settlement. As Tom stepped out, the air hit him crisp with a faint floral scent. He shouldered his pack and walked toward a cluster of alien figures waiting near a towering crystal-like structure. Their skin glistened faintly under the suns, and their eyes, large and bright, scanned him with cool curiosity. He was the only human in sight. A tall, imposing Xylarian stepped forward. "You must be Tom Firth," he said in a deep, resonant voice. "I'm Joran, the site supervisor. Welcome to Xylar." Tom nodded, trying to appear more confident than he felt. "Thanks. Happy to be here." Joran's gaze lingered for a moment. "We'll see." He gestured toward the construction site. "Follow me. I'll introduce you to the team." As they walked, Joran explained the project. "This structure will represent unity among the participating species. It's important that every race has a hand in its creation." "Understood," Tom said. "I'm here to help wherever I can." When they reached the site, Tom took in the half-finished structure. It looked almost like a giant, abstract tree made of crystalline beams. Alien workers climbed along its limbs, carrying materials and making adjustments. Nearby, a stocky human man with a grizzled beard barked orders. "That's Rafe," Joran said. "He's the lead human engineer. You'll be working closely with him." Rafe glanced over, gave a quick nod, and then returned to directing the workers. Joran moved on, leaving Tom to introduce himself. "Hey!" Tom called out as he approached. "I'm Tom. I just got in." Rafe turned, his sharp blue eyes narrowing slightly. "They told me you were coming. First time off-world." "Yeah, first time working with a team like this, too," Rafe grunted. "Well, don't expect it to be easy. These guys are good, but they don't exactly think like us. You've got to pay attention, real attention, to what they say and what they don't say." Tom nodded, trying not to seem overwhelmed. "Got it. So, what do you need me to do?" "Start by familiarizing yourself with the plans. Then we'll get you on assembly duty. I don't want anyone here standing around looking lost." Tom spent the next few hours studying the blueprints on a holographic display. The design was intricate, with dozens of interlocking segments that would form the final structure. He also noticed that many instructions had been annotated by alien hands, marks he couldn't read, but whose placement seemed significant. Rafe's advice stuck with him: pay attention to what they don't say. As the suns began to set, casting a golden glow over the plains, Tom heard a sharp whistle. He turned to see Joran and a few other Xylarian workers heading toward a communal dining area. "Come," Joran said. "Time to eat." Rafe appeared beside him. "Their food takes some getting used to. I'll help you pick something you can stomach." Tom followed Rafe into the dining hall, where long tables were arranged under a large canopy. Alien dishes, some glowing faintly, were set out in bowls and platters. The scents were both enticing and strange. "So," Tom asked as they filled their plates, "how long have you been on Xylar?" 2 years, Rafe said. "Long enough to learn the basics of their language, their customs. Long enough to know you can't take their silence as agreement. If they don't say something, it usually means they're considering their options. They don't rush decisions." Tom glanced at Joran, who was deep in conversation with another Xylarian. "He seems intense." "Joran's fair," Rafe said, "but he won't tolerate shortcuts or excuses. You'll be fine if you're honest with him." The meal was surprisingly good, though Tom wasn't sure what half the ingredients were. After dinner, the workers began talking in small groups. Tom found himself listening more than speaking, trying to understand their subtle gestures and expressions. As the evening wound down, Joran approached again. Tomorrow, you'll assist with assembling the lower framework. Rafe will show you the techniques. Rest well. Tom nodded, then glanced at Rafe. Is that as easy as it sounds? Rafe smirked. No, but you'll learn fast enough. Back at the small temporary quarters provided for human workers, Tom sat on the edge of his bunk, staring out at the alien night. The stars were unfamiliar, and the sounds outside, soft, melodic chirps from some distant creatures, were soothing yet strange. He felt a mix of excitement and nervousness about what lay ahead. In the morning, he knew he would be tested not just by the work, but by his ability to navigate a world so different from his own. But if Rafe and Joran could do it, so could he. The first morning on Xylar began with an orange glow as one of the smaller suns peeked over the horizon. Tom wasn't sure he'd slept at all. His mind was a jumble of new faces, alien customs, and the mounting pressure to prove himself. He shoved his boots on and headed to the site. Rafe was already there, standing by a towering segment of the structure that shimmered faintly under the morning light. He waved Tom over. You'll be helping with that today. Tom frowned, squinting at the intricate framework. That? Seriously? Rafe snorted. What? Too much for your first full day on the job. Don't worry, you won't be alone. As if on cue, a younger human worker jogged over. He was lean, with a tangle of brown hair and a crooked grin. You must be the newbie, the man said, holding out a hand. Name's Alan. I'll be your babysitter for the day. Tom, he said, shaking the offered hand. And I don't need babysitting. We'll see about that, Alan said with a wink. You ever used one of these before? He held up a strange tool, part scanner, part welding device from the looks of it. No, Tom admitted. Looks like it's out of a sci-fi movie. Alan laughed. Well, welcome to the future, buddy. Simpler than it looks. I'll show you. As Alan began explaining the device's functions, where to grip, how to adjust the intensity, Tom noticed that other workers had started gathering nearby. A few Xylarians stood in groups, talking in low, melodic tones. Their gestures were subtle, their expressions hard to read. Hey, Alan, Tom said as they worked. What's the deal with the Xylarians? They always seem guarded. Alan glanced over at the aliens, then shrugged. They've got a lot of history, mostly bad experiences with outsiders. Can't really blame them for being cautious. Yeah, but how do you get through to them? Tom asked. You don't, Alan said. Not really. You just do your job, show them you're reliable. If they trust you, they'll let you know in their own way. Until then, keep your head down and your work clean. Rafe approached, hands on his hips. Alan, stop yakking and get to it. Tom, you think you've got the hang of that yet? I think so, Tom said. It's actually pretty intuitive. Good, Rafe said. You'll need that today. We're working on one of the main support beams. If this thing's not perfectly aligned, the whole structure could collapse. No pressure. Great, Tom muttered. Alan clapped him on the shoulder. Don't worry. I'll double-check your work. Can't have you blowing up the job on your first day. The hours passed quickly. Tom found himself sweating under the Xylarian suns, his muscles aching as he and Alan carefully fused and aligned the crystalline beams. Alan kept up a steady stream of chatter, explaining not just the technical aspects but also some of the quirks of their alien co-workers. You see Joran over there? Alan said, nodding toward the tall Xylarian supervisor. He's got this thing where he won't talk to you unless you make eye contact first. Something about their cultural norms. I don't know. Just make sure you meet his gaze when you ask him something. And what about the others? Tom asked. Like the ones near the north side. They seem really quiet. That's the Cerulean team, Alan said. They're Xylarians, but from a different region. Even more cautious than Joran. But they're the best builders on this planet. If you get their approval, you're golden. Tom filed the information away as he worked, making mental notes of the different workers' behaviors. He found himself glancing over at the Cerulean team, wondering how he might earn their respect. The quiet focus with which they worked was intimidating, but also intriguing. By the time the second sun had risen high in the sky, they'd finished aligning the support beam. Rafe came over to inspect their work. He walked slowly around the beam, scanning it with a handheld device and muttering to himself. "Not bad," Rafe finally said. "You didn't screw it up. Alan must have done most of it." "Hey, I pulled my weight," Tom said, half joking. Rafe grinned. "Sure you did. Well, you're not useless. That's a start." Alan laughed. High praise coming from Rafe. "You're doing fine, Tom. Give it a few days and you'll be one of us." Tom felt a small flicker of pride. Maybe he could do this after all. They broke for lunch, gathering under the shade of a large canopy. The food was different. Alien vegetables, some sort of spiced grain, and a drink that fizzed on his tongue. But he was starting to get used to it. Alan sat with him, continuing to dish out advice. "Here's the thing," Alan said, leaning in. "You're gonna make mistakes. Everybody does. The trick is to own up to them right away. That's the only way you'll earn their trust. Xylarian or human, it doesn't matter. People respect honesty." "Got it," Tom said. "Anything else?" "Yeah," Alan said with a grin. "Don't try to be a hero. Just do your job, keep your head down, and for the love of everything, don't touch that purple tool over there. It's for Xylarians only." "Noted," Tom said, chuckling. As the day wound down, Tom felt a mixture of exhaustion and accomplishment. He'd survived his first real day on Xylar, worked with a team of humans and aliens, and learned more about their customs and culture. There was still a long road ahead, but at least he was moving forward. Rafe passed him on the way out. "Not bad today, kid. Keep it up and you might just fit in here." Tom smiled. "Thanks. I'll do my best." Back in his quarters that night, he sat by the window, watching the distant stars. There was still so much to learn, so many bridges to build. But for now, he was just glad to have made it through another day. The days blended together as Tom settled into the rhythm of work on Xylar. The project had started to take shape, its skeletal framework rising steadily into the pale blue sky. Each morning, Tom reported to the site, tools in hand, and joined the other human and Xylarian workers as they tackled the endless list of tasks. He'd learned to watch carefully, listen closely, and move deliberately. The Xylarians still kept their distance for the most part, but at least they no longer glanced at him with outright suspicion. Rafe, as usual, was the first to speak when Tom arrived that morning. "You're on conduit duty with Alan today. We've got a shipment of the new crystalline channels coming in, and I want them laid out and connected before the second sun's peak." "Got it. Got it," Tom said. "Where's Alan?" "Right here," Alan called from behind a stack of equipment crates. He emerged with a wide grin, his sleeves already rolled up. "Hope you're ready, Tom. It's gonna be a long one." "Great," Tom muttered, grabbing his gloves and following Alan toward the supply area. "What exactly are we doing?" "Installing the conduits that'll carry the energy flow to the upper structure," Alan explained, picking up a long, translucent pipe that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. "These things are delicate, so no dropping them. They're made from some kind of crystal alloy, super efficient, but also super fragile." "Got it. Don't drop the shiny pipes." "Exactly," Alan said, smirking. "Now, the tricky part is that we have to run them through the existing framework without disturbing the supports. It's like threading a needle, except the needle is the size of a building." "No pressure," Tom said dryly. Alan laughed. "You'll be fine. Just follow my lead." The two of them began hauling the conduits toward the designated section of the structure. The work was physically demanding. Each conduit was surprisingly heavy, and the high humidity didn't help. They had to carefully align the pipes, secure them to the framework, and ensure that the connections were perfectly sealed. Alan handled the first one, showing Tom how to adjust the clamps and check the alignment. "Like that," Alan said, stepping back to admire his work. "Now you try." Tom nodded and grabbed the next conduit. It was awkward at first, getting the angle just right, making sure the clamps were tight but not too tight. but after a few tries he started to get the hang of it. Alan watched closely, offering tips and stepping in when necessary. "Not bad," Alan said after Tom finished securing his first conduit. "A few more like that, and I might let you take the lead." "Gee, thanks," Tom said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "What an honor." "You'll earn it," Alan replied with a grin. "Now let's pick up the pace. Rafe wants these done by midsun." As they worked, Alan kept the conversation going. He talked about the other workers, the quirks of the Xylarian supervisors, and some of the challenges he'd faced on previous projects. Tom found himself relaxing a little. Alan's easygoing nature made the long hours more bearable. "See that guy over there?" Alan said, nodding toward a muscular human with a shaved head who was arguing with a Xylarian. "That's Victor. He's good at what he does, but he's got a temper. You don't want to get on his bad side." "What's he mad about?" Tom asked, glancing over. "Probably the same thing as always, someone not following his instructions to the letter. Victor's all about precision. If you can keep up with him, he'll respect you. If you can't, well, he'll let you know." "Sounds like a fun guy," Tom said. "He's not so bad once you get to know him," Alan said. "Just don't cut corners when he's around." By the time the second sun was at its peak, Tom and Alan had installed half the conduits. They took a short break under the shade of the framework, drinking water and catching their breath. "You're picking this up faster than I expected," Alan said. "I might not have to babysit you for much longer." "Glad to hear it," Tom said. "Maybe I can finally work in peace." Alan laughed. "Dream on, newbie. I'll be around to keep you on your toes." The afternoon was even more grueling than the morning. The heat seemed to intensify, and the work grew more tedious as they had to navigate tighter spaces within the framework. Alan slipped once while climbing to a higher section, but Tom managed to grab his arm before he fell. "Thanks," Alan said, a little shaken. "That could have been bad." "No problem," Tom said. "You'd do the same for me, right?" "Of course," Alan said. "But try not to test that theory, okay?" They kept going, their camaraderie growing as they shared stories about their lives back on Earth. Alan talked about his family, his decision to work on alien projects, and his plans to save up enough money to start his own construction company. Tom shared bits and pieces about his background, how he'd been a simple engineer, never expecting to leave his home planet, let alone work on a project like this. "Funny how life takes you places you never imagined," Tom said as they secured the final conduit of the day. "Yeah," Alan said, giving him a pat on the shoulder. "And here we are, building something that'll last." Tom wasn't sure how much lasting really mattered on a planet so different from his own, but he didn't argue. Instead, he stepped back to look at their work. The conduits gleamed in the sunlight, perfectly aligned and ready for the next phase of construction. "Well," Alan said, "we didn't screw it up. That's a win in my book." "Yeah," Tom said with a small smile. "A win." As they headed back to the staging area, Tom felt a bit more confident in his abilities. The day's work had been tough, but it had also shown him that he could handle it, with a little help, of course. The faint hum of alien machinery filled the air as Tom adjusted the stabilizer brackets on one of the primary support beams. The project was progressing steadily now, with most of the major framework complete. Tom and Alan had formed an efficient team, tackling each day's challenges with a mix of grit and humor. Tom's initial awkwardness on the alien world had started to fade, replaced by a growing confidence in his abilities. That morning, he arrived at the worksite to find Alan already pacing by the new shipment of crystalline panels. "Finally," Alan said, throwing his hands up in mock exasperation. "I was starting to think you'd taken off for a vacation." Tom grinned. "Don't get too excited. I'm still here to make you look good." "Yeah, right. Today you're carrying the load, my friend. We've got a lot of ground to cover." Rafe strolled up, a data pad in hand. "Good, you're both here. We need to secure those panels onto the outer framework before midday. I don't want to hear any excuses. Just get it done." "Sure thing, boss," Alan said with a sarcastic salute. "Come on, Tom. Let's get moving before he gives us another lecture." They started hauling the crystalline panels one by one, positioning them against the framework and fastening them into place. The panels were heavier than they looked, and the job required precise alignment to ensure the structure's integrity. As they worked, Alan kept up a steady stream of commentary. "Did you hear about Joran's team?" Alan said, adjusting a clamp. "Apparently, they had some kind of technical glitch yesterday. Shut down their entire section for hours." "No kidding," Tom replied, trying to balance a panel while tightening the fasteners. "What was the problem?" "Something to do with their scanners," Alan said. "You know, those fancy Xylarian devices that are supposed to be foolproof? Turns out, they're not." "Well, that makes me feel better," Tom said. "At least when I screw up, it's just a normal human mistake." Alan chuckled. "Exactly. We're reliable in our mediocrity." Rafe passed by, eyeing their progress. "I hope you two aren't standing around chatting. Those panels won't install themselves." "We're on it," Alan called out. As soon as Rafe was out of earshot, he muttered, "What a ray of sunshine, that guy." Tom laughed. "You gotta admit, he keeps us in line." "True," Alan said, hefting another panel. "But sometimes I wonder if he even knows how to crack a smile." The hours dragged on, with the sun beating down on them and the constant hum of machinery filling the air. By midday they had completed the "Give us a second to catch our breath." Rafe gave him a look that could have frozen lava. "You'll catch your breath when the job's done." "Got it," Alan said quickly. As Rafe walked away, Alan muttered, "One of these days, I'm going to find out if he's actually a robot." Tom grinned. "If he is, I'm betting he's powered by pure caffeine and stress." They got back to work, carefully aligning the next set of panels. Tom's arms ached from lifting, but he kept going, following Alan's lead and adjusting each piece until it fit perfectly. By late afternoon, they'd finished the second row and were starting on the third. "You're getting the hang of this?" Alan said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Pretty soon. I'll be the one standing around watching you." "Don't get too comfortable," Tom said. "I'm still counting on you to show me the ropes." "Fair enough," Alan said. "But I've got to say, you're not bad for a guy who's never set foot off Earth before." "Thanks, I think," Tom said. "I'm just trying to keep up." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic clanking of tools and the occasional beep of scanners the only sounds. The structure loomed above them, its crystalline surface catching the light and refracting it into soft rainbows. Tom couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment as he saw how much they'd completed. By the time the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the landscape in warm hues, they had nearly finished the third row of panels. Alan stretched and let out a sigh. "That's enough for today," he said. "If Rafe wants more, he can come down here and do it himself." Tom laughed. "I'd pay to see that." Alan shook his head, grinning. "Not gonna happen. Come on, let's head back. I need a drink." They walked back to the staging area, their tools slung over their shoulders. Other workers were wrapping up for the day as well, exchanging quiet words and gestures. Tom noticed that the Xylarians were still mostly reserved, but a few had started nodding at him in greeting. It wasn't much, but it was something. As they sat down under the canopy, sipping water and catching their breath, Tom turned to Alan. "Thanks for sticking with me, man. This would be a lot harder on my own." "Hey, we're a team," Alan said. "You're pulling your weight, and that's all that matters. Just keep showing up and doing your best, and everything else will fall into place." Tom nodded, letting the words sink in. The work was tough, and the environment was still strange, but having someone like Alan around made it manageable. He wasn't just surviving on Xylar, he was starting to feel like he belonged. As the project neared its final stages, the atmosphere at the construction site shifted. There was still the constant hum of activity, the clink of tools, and the occasional burst of static from the intercoms, but there was also a tension that hadn't been there before. Each worker seemed more focused, more driven. The once friendly banter grew sparse, replaced by intense discussions and sharp instructions. The monument was starting to look like the vision in the blueprints, its elegant, crystalline spires rising into the sky like a frozen symphony, but everyone knew they were running out of time. Tom arrived at the worksite that morning to find Alan pacing near the eastern support structure. Alan's usually relaxed demeanor was gone. His jaw was set, his hands moving in quick, agitated gestures as he spoke into his headset. "No, I said we need it by today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today." Alan snapped before catching sight of Tom. He waved him over, covering the mouthpiece of the headset with his hand. "You're just in time. We've got a problem." "Good morning to you too," Tom said, though his smile quickly faded. "What's going on?" "Shipment's late," Alan said, pulling off the headset and tossing it onto a nearby crate. "Without those stabilizers, we're dead in the water. And Rafe is breathing down my neck about it." Tom frowned. "How late are we talking?" "Hours, at least. Maybe the whole day if we're unlucky." Before Tom could respond, Rafe strode over, his face like a thundercloud. "What are you two standing around for? We've got other tasks to handle until those parts arrive." Alan sighed. "We're just figuring out the best way to." "Stop figuring and start moving," Rafe cut in. "The northwest segment still needs reinforcement, and the data feeds aren't calibrated yet. Split up and take care of it." As Rafe walked off, Alan rolled his eyes. "He's in a great mood today. Is he ever not?" Tom asked, grabbing his toolkit. "Nope," Alan said, but his smile returned just a little. "Come on, let's knock out those reinforcements. It's not exactly thrilling work, but at least it's something we can control." They worked side by side, securing the beams that supported the structure's lower levels. The job wasn't complicated, but it was painstaking. Each bolt and bracket had to be perfectly aligned to ensure the monument's stability. Tom focused on his tasks, matching Alan's pace and rhythm. They fell into an easy rhythm, exchanging the occasional comment or joke to keep the monotony at bay. "You ever think about what this thing's actually going to look like when it's done?" Tom asked after a while. Alan paused, adjusting a bolt. "Honestly, not really. I'm more concerned about whether it's going to stand up without collapsing. The big picture's not my job, that's for the designers. I just make sure the pieces fit." "Fair enough," Tom said, tightening a clamp. "Still, it's kind of cool to think about. I mean, we're building something that's going to be around long after we're gone." "Sure," Alan said with a smirk, "but only if we do it right." They finished the reinforcements by midday and moved on to the data feeds. This part of the job involved intricate wiring and programming, delicate work that required steady hands and sharp focus. Alan handled the main connections while Tom double-checked the calibrations. The two worked in silence for a while, their concentration undivided. "You've gotten a lot better at this," Alan said eventually. "When you first got here, I figured you'd be fumbling around for weeks, but now, you're actually keeping up." "Thanks," Tom said, glancing at him. "It helps having a decent teacher." Alan laughed. "Decent, huh? I'll take that." As the afternoon stretched on, the missing shipment finally arrived. The stabilizers were delivered in heavy crates, and Rafe wasted no time assigning tasks. Alan and Tom teamed up again, hauling the equipment into position and installing it with precision. The stabilizers had to be carefully integrated into the existing framework. One wrong move and they'd have to start over. They were halfway through the installation when a sudden gust of wind shook the structure. Tom froze, his hands tightening on the equipment. "Did you feel that?" he asked. "Yeah," Alan said, his voice low. "Zyler's weather's been weird lately. Could just be a one-off." "Let's hope so," Tom said, glancing up at the towering spires. The last thing they needed was a storm to set them back even further. They worked into the evening, pushing themselves to get the stabilizers in place before the light faded completely. By the time they finished, both men were drenched in sweat and covered in dust, but the structure stood firm. Tom stood back, looking up at their day's work with a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. "Not bad," Alan said, leaning against a crate. "We might actually pull this off." "Yeah," Tom said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I think we might." They packed up their tools and headed to the staging area, where the rest of the crew was gathering for a quick debrief. Rafe, as usual, was all business, outlining the next day's tasks and emphasizing the need for absolute precision. When he finally dismissed them, Tom felt a wave of relief. Another day down, another step closer to the finish line. As they walked back to the quarters, Alan nudged Tom with his elbow. "You did good today. You weren't too bad yourself," Tom said, smirking. Alan laughed. "What can I say? I've got a knack for this stuff. Just stick with me, kid. We'll get through this." The wind howled across the plains as Tom and Alan worked their way around the monument's towering frame, carrying a load of crystalline panels. The structure had begun to gleam faintly under the planet's suns, a testament to how much progress the team had made. But that morning, something felt off. The usually bustling site seemed tense. Workers spoke in hushed tones, casting wary glances at each other. Even Rafe was quieter than usual, his stern expression betraying an edge of unease. "What's with everyone?" Tom asked Alan as they secured the panels into place. "Feels like the whole site's on edge." "You haven't heard?" Alan asked, his voice lowered. "There was sabotage last night. One of the north supports was tampered with. Almost collapsed the whole section." Tom paused, the panel still in his grip. "Sabotage? By who?" "Don't know," Alan said, shaking his head. "That's what everyone's trying to figure out. Joran's been grilling the teams all morning." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Joran appeared at the base of the structure. The Xylarian supervisor's sharp, luminescent eyes swept the workers, finally landing on Tom and Alan. "You too," Joran called out. "Come here." Tom and Alan exchanged a glance before making their way down. As they approached, they saw a group of Xylarians gathered around a disassembled beam. The supports were intact, but some of the clamps had been clearly loosened, leaving the entire section dangerously unstable. Joran didn't waste time. "Were you working on this section last night?" "No," Alan replied quickly. "We were assigned to the east supports. Rafe can confirm that." Joran's gaze shifted to Tom. "And you? Did you see anyone near this area?" Tom shook his head. "No, I didn't. We finished our section late and went straight to the quarters." Joran's eyes lingered on him for a moment, as if searching for any hint of deception. Tom kept his expression steady, willing the Xylarian to believe him. After a tense pause, Joran turned to the other workers. "Spread the word," Joran said. "If anyone saw or heard anything suspicious, they need to report it immediately. I won't tolerate this kind of recklessness. If this happens again, the entire project could be in jeopardy." With that, Joran strode off, leaving Tom and Alan standing by the damaged beam. Alan let out a low whistle. "That was intense. You think he suspects us?" Tom sighed. "I don't know, but we need to be careful. If this keeps happening, they're going to start pointing fingers." The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but the mood on the site remained tense. Everyone was on high alert, watching each other as they worked. Tom tried to focus on his tasks, but his mind kept wandering. Who would sabotage the monument, and why? As he secured another panel, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Later that evening, as the workers gathered in the communal dining area, Tom and Alan sat together at a corner table. The room was quieter than usual, with groups huddled together in low conversation. Rafe sat at the far end, speaking in hushed tones with Joran and another Xylarian supervisor. "Do you think it's someone from our crew?" Tom asked, leaning in so only Alan could hear. "Hard to say," Alan replied. "Most of the humans here have been solid, but there are a few who've had issues with the Xylarians. And vice versa. Still, sabotaging the structure seems extreme," Tom said. "What could they gain from it?" Alan shrugged. "Could be a protest against the whole project. Some folks don't think humans and Xylarians should be working together. They want to keep things separate, you know?" Tom frowned. "That's short-sighted. The whole point of this monument is to show that we can cooperate." "Not everyone sees it that way," Alan said. "I've heard a few grumbles about the Xylarians getting special treatment, and I'm sure they have their own complaints about us." As they spoke, a shadow fell across the table. They looked up to see Rafe standing over them, his arms crossed. Care to share what's so fascinating? Rafe asked, his tone sharp. Just talking about the sabotage, Alan said smoothly. Trying to figure out who'd want to do something so stupid. Rafe's eyes narrowed. You let me worry about that. Just focus on your work. The last thing we need is more rumors. With that, Rafe turned and walked away, leaving the two men in awkward silence. Tom watched him go, then turned back to Alan. Guess that means no gossiping, Tom said, trying to lighten the mood. Alan smirked. Like that's going to stop anyone. But he's right. Best we just keep our heads down. The next few days passed without incident, but the tension never fully eased. Joran and Rafe kept a close watch on everyone, their presence a constant reminder of the sabotage. Tom and Alan continued their work, maintaining a steady pace and avoiding any unnecessary confrontations. Still, Tom couldn't stop himself from keeping an eye out. He studied the workers, looking for any hint of suspicious behavior. It wasn't until late one afternoon that Tom noticed something unusual. As he and Alan were wrapping up for the day, Tom caught sight of a human worker, Victor, lingering near one of the support beams. Victor was one of the more experienced engineers, known for his no-nonsense attitude and sharp tongue. But the way he was examining the beam seemed off. He kept glancing around, as if making sure no one was watching. Hey, Alan, Tom said quietly. Check this out. Alan turned to look, frowning as he saw Victor adjusting something on the beam. What's he doing? I don't know, Tom said, but it looks like he's messing with the support clamps. Alan's expression hardened. Let's go find Joran. Now. The day of the monument's completion dawned with clear skies and a light breeze sweeping across the plains. Tom arrived early at the site, the air buzzing with a mixture of excitement and tension. Workers from all species hurried around, adding the final touches, polishing the crystalline spires until they gleamed under the planet's twin suns. The project was nearly done, and the team's hard work was about to be unveiled. Tom spotted Alan near the base of the monument, tightening one of the final support brackets. You're here early, Tom said as he approached. Couldn't sleep, Alan admitted. Figured I'd get a head start on the last-minute stuff. Can't have Rafe breathing down my neck on a day like this. Smart move, Tom said. He grabbed his tools and joined Alan. You think they'll actually pull this off? The ceremony? Alan shrugged. Hard to say. The Xylarians seem confident enough. Joran's been going over the schedule all morning. If it runs smoothly, we might actually get a break for once. Here's hoping, Tom said. They worked together in silence for a while, tightening clamps and securing panels. The monument loomed above them, its interwoven crystalline beams refracting light into subtle rainbows that played across the ground. As they finished, Joran appeared, looking as composed as ever. Good, he said, his voice calm but firm. The lower structure is complete. You two, double-check the west supports before the ceremony. We don't want any surprises. On it, Alan said. He shot Tom a look as Joran walked away. Still can't tell if he's satisfied or just barely tolerating us. I'll take it, Tom said. Better than another lecture. They moved on to the west side of the monument, inspecting every connection and tightening bolts where needed. The atmosphere around them was electric. Workers from various species gathered near the staging area, their conversations filled with anticipation. A large platform had been set up at the base of the monument, and a small crowd was beginning to form. Alan paused mid-tightening and nodded toward the platform. Looks like the bigwigs are here. I see Rafe, Joran, and... Is that the planetary governor? Tom followed Alan's gaze and spotted a tall, stately Xylarian in elaborate robes. Must be. He's got the ceremonial garb and everything. Great, Alan said. Just what we need. More people watching us. They finished their inspections and returned to the staging area, where Rafe was waiting. Everything secure? Rafe asked. Yeah, Alan said. No issues. West side's good to go. Good, Rafe said. For once, his tone was almost approving. You two get cleaned up. The ceremony starts in an hour. By the time the ceremony began, the entire team was gathered around the platform. Humans, Xylarians, and other species stood side by side, watching as the planetary governor stepped forward. The governor's voice was clear and resonant, carrying easily over the crowd. Today, the governor began, we celebrate not just the completion of this structure, but the collaboration that made it possible. Each of you contributed to a project that stands as a symbol of unity and cooperation. This monument is a reminder that when we work together, we can achieve something greater than ourselves. The crowd listened intently as the governor spoke about the challenges the project had faced. The early tensions, the sabotage, the moments when it seemed progress had stalled. Through it all, the team had persevered, finding common ground and learning from each other's strengths. Alan leaned toward Tom and whispered, "Do you think he knows we're the ones who actually held this thing together?" Tom smirked. "Probably not. But hey, we'll always have the memories." "Yeah, memories of Rafe yelling at us every 5 minutes," Alan muttered. "Real inspiring stuff." "Shoo," Tom said, suppressing a chuckle. "He's almost done." As the governor concluded his speech, the crowd erupted into applause. The workers cheered, clapping each other on the back and exchanging congratulatory handshakes. Even Rafe allowed himself a small smile as he looked up at the finished monument. "You too," Rafe said, turning to Tom and Alan. "Good work out there. I don't say this often, but I'm proud of what we've done." Alan blinked. Did he just say he's proud? "I think so," Tom said, grinning. "Better savor the moment. It might never happen again." As the celebration continued, Tom found himself wandering around the site, taking it all in. The monument's crystalline surface shimmered in the sunlight, casting multicolored reflections that danced across the ground. Workers from different species mingled freely, sharing stories and laughing. The sense of accomplishment was palpable, and for the first time, Tom felt like he truly belonged. Alan caught up with him, holding 2 cups of the local Xylarian drink. "Here," Alan said, handing one over. "You look like you could use a break." "Thanks," Tom said, taking a sip. The drink was sweet and slightly tangy, a welcome refreshment after the long day. "Not bad. Not bad," Alan said, feigning offense. "This stuff is amazing. You've been here how long? And you're still not appreciating the local delicacies." Tom laughed. "Give me time. I'm still adjusting." Alan nodded toward the monument. "It's something, isn't it? All the work we put in, and now it's finally done." "Yeah," Tom said, his gaze lingering on the spires. "We actually pulled it off. And without it falling over," Alan said with a grin. "That's gotta be worth a drink." They clinked their cups together, their laugh. Shining structure, he couldn't help but feel a spark of pride. Tom stood at the edge of the project site, watching the sun set over the now complete monument. The structure sparkled in the fading light, its crystalline beams reflecting hues of purple and orange across the plains. Workers lingered in small groups, their tasks finally finished. Alan joined him, carrying 2 steaming cups of the local Xylarian brew. "You're not thinking of staying out here all night, are you?" Alan asked, handing Tom a cup. Tom smiled, taking the drink. "Just taking it all in. It feels different now that we're done." "Yeah," Alan agreed. "It's like the whole place is quieter. No more Rafe yelling, no more clanging tools. Just us and the scenery. Kind of peaceful, isn't it?" Tom said, sipping the drink. It was rich and warm, with a hint of spice that reminded him of Earth's cinnamon. "So, what's next for you?" Alan shrugged. "Not sure yet. Maybe another job on another planet. There's always a need for builders out here." "What about you?" Tom hesitated. "I haven't decided. I thought once we finished this, I'd go back to Earth. But now, I'm not so sure." Alan raised an eyebrow. "You thinking of staying?" "Maybe," Tom said. "I mean, it's not like I have anything waiting for me back home. And it feels like I've finally found my place here." Alan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, I get that. It's weird, though. I've been working off-world for years, and I've never thought about staying anywhere. But this place, I don't know, it feels different." "Maybe it's the monument," Tom said. "We put so much into it. It's hard to just walk away. Could be, Alan said. Or maybe it's the people. I mean, we built something together, something that really means something. That's not something you can find just anywhere. Tom glanced over at the workers still mingling near the monument. Xylarians and humans shared stories, their laughter carrying on the breeze. He spotted Joran standing off to the side, talking quietly with a group of younger workers. Even Rafe looked more relaxed, leaning against a supply crate and actually smiling. You know, Tom said, when I first got here, I wasn't sure I'd even last a week. I felt like an outsider. And now, Alan asked. Tom took a deep breath. Now I feel like I belong, like I'm part of something bigger. Alan clapped him on the shoulder. Well, if you do decide to stay, you'll have at least one familiar face around. Thanks, Tom said, smiling. That means a lot. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last rays of sunlight fade. The monument's glow softened in the twilight, but it remained visible, an unmistakable presence in the landscape. So, Alan said, breaking the silence, what's your plan for tomorrow? Tom laughed. Tomorrow? I think I'll sleep in. Maybe for the first time since I got here. Sounds like a solid plan, Alan said with a grin. But don't get too used to it. You know Rafe will be looking for something else to keep us busy. Yeah, Tom said, chuckling. I'll enjoy the peace while it lasts. The two men raised their cups in a silent toast, then turned to join the others near the monument. As Tom walked, he felt a sense of calm he hadn't known before. The project was done, but his time on Xylar wasn't. He'd found his footing, his place among a group of people who had become more than just co-workers. They were a team, a community, and maybe, just maybe, a reason to stay.